If you're a liar and you're a fake, it doesn't matter how long it takes, we're going to find you out. If you're true blue, we're going to know because it's going to show in how you act. But when you're fake and we find out, the ass kicking you got coming is unbelievably going to be the most painful day of your life.
In smoky rooms where deals are made, loyalty the ace he's played. A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.
Brothers and sisters, welcome back. Welcome back to another wonderful edition of the Friend of Ours podcast. This is a limited edition series hosted by your main man, Duke Loves Wrestling, and of course, one of the greatest of all times, the Don himself, Big Vito LoGrasso. How you doing there, Vito?
I'm doing fine. I want to say hello to everybody out there, and I hope everybody's having a great day. Thank you for showing the love and the support. We greatly appreciate it. Everything is going well. We are so glad that you like our content. Please tell your friends about it. Please keep spreading the word. We're doing some great things here. And of course, I'm with my partner, Duke of Wrestling.
Before we jump into the mix here, and of course, like you said, thank you to everyone listening. I hear there are some Sopranos groups on Facebook that have started to pick up on our content, which is awesome. So definitely keep sharing that because we got some more goodies for you. We're going to be going over the children of the Sopranos this week, but we got a request because folks said that they disagreed with my assessment that Phil Leotardo was the biggest heel in Sopranos history. They enjoyed the episode, but they disagreed. They want us to cover Ralph. So we're going to cover Ralph next episode, absolutely, and really dig into that guy because he was a piece of work. So I agree with you there, folks. Stay tuned for that. But before we get into the meat and potatoes here, I got to say this.
Good.
Vito, I noticed that there was a little situation this past week where people were using your likeness and creating fake merchandise with it. So, number one, what happened, and number two, what's the call to action, so to speak, for those of us who want to continue to support you and make sure that we're not tapping into things that are not yours?
Well, guys, there was an incident this past week, and my wife, Noelle, who does a wonderful job of running the controls and behind the scenes and also helps out with this show. Um, there was somebody on Timu who stole our merchandise out of our store and selling it on Timu. We had to write Timu. They got in touch with us quickly. We told them what happened. We showed them our paperwork. And anybody out there who ever sells anything, always make sure you have copyrights, you have paperwork, you have all your ducks in a row because people will steal from you. Once we showed them this, they closed the gentleman's store. They eliminated them. These people are overseas. And right now we're waiting to hear about compensation for this incident. It was very disturbing because we're trying to make ends meet and we're trying to hustle like everybody out there. And it's just not just for me, but we are all in this together, people, worldwide. And there's a lot of things in the world going on. But when somebody's taking some money out of your pocket or taking food out of your children's mouths, or you come up a little short, not to say that everyone is poor, but every nickel counts and every nickel helps, and it's your hard work. Always be ready to defend yourself and speak up. Do not let it go. Duke, it was a very hard thing to accept that somebody's going to steal from me because, we don't do anything except do good things here, especially on social media. And in my career, Noel's great, and being a part of you, you know, we're good people, and what we're trying to do is make a dent in this world. We're not making a huge dent, but we're making a significant effort to provide entertainment and well-being for everybody out there. So if they listen to this show, or they follow me, or they follow Noel, or they follow Duke, if that gives you peace of mind for 20 or 30 minutes of your day, hey, we did something. But when you want to steal money and steal people's merchandise and likeness, that's real shitty. But would you do it in front of me? No. Would you do it from a different country? Of course you're going to do it, but you never know if I'm going to show up and find you, because I'm going to slap the taste out of your mouth, because I can't stand people who steal. I can't do it. You know what I mean? If things fall off a truck, it's a different story. We're not going to bring up the Lufthansa heist, because that's really a different story. But Duke, you get the gist of what I'm saying.
I get the gist of what you're saying. I mean, it's a crazy backhanded compliment. You're such a big deal that this low life 3-time losers uh, goes out and recreates your merchandise without permission and is selling it on Timu. And I think it's fascinating that you were able to figure it out and get it shut down. But it's like, wow, just think about how hot the Big Vito brand is, that people are doing things like that. They wouldn't be copying the merchandise of somebody who's a nobody. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I get you, Duke. But you know what? Just the fact that we're doing our thing, and then these people think they're slick. It's like this. If anybody out there works in a bank, I'll give you this scenario, right? Now, everybody, there's always one out of 1,000 who thinks I'm going to outsmart this system. And you work in a bank, you think you have it figured out. You're not going to take a 20. You're going to take 20 grand, or you're going to go big. Because if you do a bunch of little hits, is it really worth it? If you're going to go big, go big. If you're going to go small, don't even try it. But there's always that one person who thinks they're going to rob a bank, get away with it, right? They think they have everything figured out and covered. Never works out. Never works out. And it's just like this. When you think you can do this from another country and just come in and walk in and take somebody's stuff, you're going to get found out. And it's not like they took, a t-shirt and sold it on eBay, and, they made a couple bucks. Guy took the whole damn thing. So you went big, you lost. Hopefully you never do it again. But guys, when people work to work and they have a brand and they put their careers on, I put 34 years in this business, and I earned everything I got. Nobody gave me nothing. I might not have millions, but whatever I do have, I earned. And when you want to take from me, it pisses me off, because nobody did the training, nobody else did the grind, nobody else put the time, the patience, the effort. Nobody took everybody's constructive criticism like I did and put it to good use. And that's how you become a pro. And that's what we're doing now. And because of that hard work, I'm able to do this show with Duke and be successful at it, because we have the content to speak about, and I have the experience to back up what we say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once again, thank you for the compliment. Big Vito and the Big Vito brand is as hot as it's ever been, and that's fantastic. But you don't need to steal, guys. Come on, don't do that, please. And for everyone out there, if you see anything that's fugazi, do what others have done, and just let us know so we can get that shut down. We don't need those problems. In fact, why don't we plug the website there, Vito? For anyone who actually wants to get the good stuff, what's your main website where they can go from there?
BigVito.com. Just go to BigVito.com. Guys, if you're on X, you're on TikTok, you are on Facebook, you're on Instagram, and you want something, contact me directly. Contact Duke. I have Don stuff that I have, Ring One Don stuff that I'm willing to sell. If you want a piece of it, contact me. I'd be more than happy to sell it to you. It's not a problem. If you ask me for something and then we can negotiate a price, ask me. That's all you got to do. If you want anything, just ask. I'm not a hard guy to deal with. I would like to make some extra money. So if you would like something, hey, let's make a deal. You would need anything, go to bigvito.com, or you can get in touch with me on Facebook at the Big Vito brand. You can get in touch with Duke at Duke of Wrestling. You can get with Noel Harlow LoGrasso, Magic T Spiller, and let's try to do something in a very collective way so everybody could be happy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So merchandise that you want signed, or you want an autographed picture or something like that. If you have an event and you want to book Vito, like we can have those conversations. But again, do good business, folks. Do not steal. It's not right. It's a tough world out there, especially these days. We don't need to be taking from anyone. Let's work together and have a good time together. That's the main idea. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to the main event here. The children of the Sopranos. Now, this is a very interesting concept here because everyone always focuses on the adults, which is important, but the children are always affected. It's hard to see that when you're just living life and you're ripping and roaring, and no matter who you are, no matter what line of work you're in, but your children see it all and they experience it all. They know when you're happy, they know when you're sad. When somebody has a big celebration, they see that. When somebody is on tough times, or unfortunately passes away, disappears, whatever, they see that as well. They are affected. And The Sopranos did a fantastic job of showing from different perspectives how children are affected by the decisions that their adults around them make. So, yeah, AJ and Meadow, who are Tony Soprano's kids, of course, we're going to talk about that. But Vito and I had a conversation, and we both agreed the best example of what it's like to be a kid who's born into the life is Jackie Aprile Jr. Here is a young man whose father was a boss. In fact, Tony was part of his crew. And unfortunately, Jackie Aprile Sr., he ended up with cancer. And we got to see that play out where eventually he passes away from cancer. And this was Tony's, one of his best friends there, and a guy that he really looked up to. So he took it pretty hard personally. And the one thing that Tony promised Jackie Aprile Sr. was that he would look after his son. He would look after his family, but of course he would look after his son. Now, Jackie Aprile Jr. was a high school kid who was now transitioning into college. And he was a smart kid. His father was always talking about how good he was with numbers and how smart he is. And he's so proud of him, always beaming, talking about Jackie Aprile Jr. And, the guys in the crew, they would see Jackie Jr. come around and they'd all light up and smile and look at the kid because it's like, wow, look at that. This kid's going to be a somebody someday. He's not going to be like us where we have to scrape and fight to survive. This kid is going to make something more out of himself. We're doing the things that we're doing right now in order to make it easier for that kid to go on the straight and narrow. Maybe he'll be a doctor, a lawyer, an astronaut, a teacher, or whatever, but he's going to be straight. Unfortunately, the kid had his own ideas. So before we get into that too much, I want to stop there. Vito, what do you think about that recap leading up to it? Anything you have to say about Jackie Aprile Jr. before we find out that he's doing things he shouldn't be doing?
Jackie Aprile Jr., like you said, he was rich. His father was a mob boss. And, of course, all mob bosses don't want their kids to follow in their footsteps. I mean, that's taken true to heart. That is definitely, they want better for their kids. And, you know, this being the fact with Jackie Aprile Jr., he was smart, he had brains, he had good looks, he was, studying to be a doctor, he went to the best college, and he had potential to be something great in the world. When his father died, he thought he was entitled to be the successor. Now, Tony Soprano, being his friend, wasn't going to let this happen, and it didn't let it happen because you don't let a kid who's just 18, 19 years old, I believe that's how he was, how old he was, um, take over a family, especially somebody who doesn't have the experience, the know-how, the look, the savoir-faire, the connections. Because at that age, if you have power, you're running, you're running wild in the streets, and you're trying to be a gangbanger and trying to, thinking you're a wise guy, but all you're doing is being a target. And that's what ended up happening to him, Jackie Aprile Jr., when he didn't, you know, follow the rules. Now, he did try to, he did have something with Meadow, which was good. Tony okayed it at first because it was Jackie Aprile's son, but then once he saw, Jackie Aprile Jr., strip club, chicks, the lifestyle, he slapped him up and he disrespected Tony and disrespected his daughter because there was a possible marriage involved, with Meadow. And it could have been something where he he could have possibly been inaugurated or taken along for a ride or given something to keep in the family business, you know. But once he cheated on Meadow and he got more involved in organized crime, that's when Tony put a stop to it, and then that was it. And I'll let you continue from here.
Well said. Well said all over there. Um, we find out that Jackie Jr., once his father passes away, like you said there, uh, he starts getting into things, doing petty crimes, stuff that little punks do, trying to score on taking advantage of people that he sees in college and things like that. Little stuff, even Christopher at one point was involved in something that Jackie Aprile Jr. is trying to do. The knucklehead even knocks off a card game like a complete goofball. You don't rob wise guys. You just don't do that. But this kid wanted to be in the life. That's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to focus on college. He wanted to be in the life. He's out here, they're selling ecstasy and they're doing all these different things. Tony wanted to kill him because, if your father would be rolling in his grave if he knew what you were doing right now. This is not what he wanted for you. What are you doing? Talking to him like he would talk to his own kids, because that's exactly it. It's like, look, I modeled my family after the way that your father was growing his family. The way that your father was making a way for you, that's what I'm making for my kids. So if you, the son of a boss, can't stay on the straight and narrow, then it makes me wonder, is this what's going to happen to my kids too? I mean, we're talking about The Sopranos, but it's so ironic because The Godfather, when Don Vito Corleone finds out that it was Michael who killed the enemies in the restaurant, then he had to go to Italy. Don Vito, the look on his face, the disgust and disappointment, he just turned his head and waved his hand like, just get the hell away from me, because he never wanted that for Michael, of all people. He never wanted Michael to be in the life. Jackie Aprile Jr. was never supposed to be a gangster. And like Vito said, he didn't have it in him. The kid just didn't. Gangsters are born, in my opinion. Fighters are born, in my opinion. There's something in you that, the scrappy nature, the never give up, the willingness to go all the way. You either have it or you don't. I don't believe stuff like that can be taught. I believe stuff like that can be refined, but I think you got to have a certain instinct that you were born with. Vito, you're a guy who you're known as being a no nonsense guy, tough guy, a sweet and gentle guy, and people love you, you're the life of the party and all that. But when it's time to get serious, people don't play games, and you have that reputation going all the way back. Do you agree with me that this is something that you were born with, or do you feel that this is something that taught or trained to be like?
Well, it's something that you're born with, but it's like anything else. And I mention this all the time. You got to be coachable. So I'll bring everybody up to speed on what I mean. When John Gotti was the boss and John Jr. was in the military academy, and Jr. didn't want to go to the academy, figured he wanted to be something else. John Gotti saw that he had the potential for him to do this, so he let him come into the family business. He didn't let him come, but he earned it, and he knew how to carry himself at a young age. He followed his father's tutelage and taught him how to be in charge, how to be the man. And what happened when John Gotti went to jail, it was John Jr. calling the shots and going to these top wise guys and other families saying, nobody's going to disrespect my father, and this is the way it's going to go. And if you remember a couple scenes from there, when they're sitting outside, and when Angelo got found it out and got ousted by the family and put him out to pasture, he says, Dad, why can't I talk to Angelo? He says, you can't, don't let me find out. He's banished. I saved his life. That's all I could do. He says, but we can't, he broke a cardinal rule in the mafia, and something that you don't do. So you don't put a hit on somebody unless it's sanctioned. Doesn't matter how hard you are. You have rules to follow. If you don't follow the rules, you're going to be killed. Jackie Aprile Jr. did not follow the rules, and he was killed. And for all the mishap that he did in trying to do the college heist, the card game had to be the dumbest thing I ever seen. He's in a mask and he's talking, and he hangs out. These guys are in his backyard. These are his friends. Christopher is his buddy. So Christopher pegged him right away and said, okay, take it. You don't know who you're robbing. And Christopher played along. And I think Christopher might have had a kickback coming to him to shut his mouth. But when that gun went off and then they started firing, that's when things went crazy. And there was nothing else to do. But you had to kill Jackie Aprile as revenge. And that was the outcome of that. You do dumb. Dumb is dumb. You can't fix dumb. And that was probably one of the dumbest things he ever did in his short-lived Sopranos career.
Well, and it's easy to be dumb when you're just ignorant. There's no replacement for experience. I don't care who you are. I don't care how great you could be. I don't care what your potential is. Experience is king. And when you're not experienced enough to realize that if you're going to be trying to hide your identity, the way that you walk, the way that you talk, all of that matters. Your mannerisms, there are natural tells that everyone has. And it's hard to get rid of that. My voice is my voice. When you hear my voice, you know that it's me. There's no question about it. When you hear me talk, you know it's me because I talk a certain way. It's a very distinct thing going on here. It's a tell. The way that I walk, I banged up my knee as a kid playing football, my knee and my pelvis. So I got a slight little limp that some people would say, "Oh, he's trying to walk like he's cool." In reality, I got runner's knee, my kneecap. It goes side to side instead of the normal thing there. One day I'll have to get surgery. That's another story. But I can't go out and commit crimes trying to hide my identity, considering the way that I walk. It ain't gonna work. It's just not gonna work. You know what I mean? But I'm old enough to understand that. And anyone who's ever watched these true crime shows and you listen to how the cops, when they talk about how they're able to figure out who's who, they say, "Hey, yeah, he's wearing things that are covering his identity, but look at his shoes; those are very distinct shoes. Not a lot of people have those type of shoes. So you can go out and you can figure that out, or look at the way that they walk, or like what happened. The goofball Jackie was talking. Oh, you can hear his voice. Folks, this is why crime doesn't always pay, because you have criminals who don't think about the fact that there is more to it than just what you can come up with in your brain. So if you're not talking to experienced people and mapping things out, and you're just a bunch of college kids trying to figure it out, of course you're going to screw up. Of course you're going to get caught, and it is going to cost you your life. A very sad ending to Jackie Aprile, because he lacked experience, because he didn't follow his father's wishes, because he didn't do what Tony told him to do. If that kid would have just stuck with college, got a degree, I guarantee you he would have never had to want for anything in life. At the very least, he probably could have been a lawyer, you know? Instead, he sleeps with the fishes.
So here it is, like, and everybody looks at the lifestyle and they all say, and I know everybody's heard me say, hey, you got to have a gumad and, Thursday night, and Cosmo night and all that, which is a true thing of the lifestyle. But if you're a boss and somebody's trying to guide you, don't do as I do as I say. Okay? I'm going to repeat that for everybody, and this is going to be a very important thing. Don't do as I do as I say. That means if you have a girlfriend and she's the boss's daughter, you don't do as I do and go to the same clubs and try to score hookers. You take care of my daughter and I will take care of you. First mistake, right? So then you talk about don't do as I do as I say. Now, Tony and Jackie Aprile knocked off a card game. That's how they got started, a famous card game. So, like, you bring it up and you say, guys, let's do this card game. We could be known. Don't do as I do as I say. Tony never instructed him to do anything. And then when Richie Aprile and that came around and got out of prison, and he wanted to have a sit down with Tony, and Jackie Aprile Jr. was representing Richie, it didn't go so well because the kid is talking to the boss, and Richie Aprile wanted to get his game back after being in the can for 10 years and thought he had it coming, especially since his brother ran it and Tony inherited it after the death. Bad timing on the kid. You don't speak, men speak men business. Kids don't speak men business. If people can understand that respectfully, especially when you're talking about wise guys and guys who are made guys. It's just like me. I knew who the main players were and I knew who all the big time wise guys were. I never overstepped my bound because I was somebody in wrestling and I was a celebrity and I tried to act cool in a club. I knew who I was in the club. I knew what reputation I built. I knew who I was. But when it came to seeing those guys, always a handshake, always respect. Never dated any of their daughters. Never went near none of their family. Always a hello. Um, and that's what they liked about me most is that I was respectful. When you don't show the respect to the guys who paved the way, that's when things get a little crazy and that's when you get yourself in trouble. Duke, am I saying anything you don't already know?
No, you're nailing it. You're nailing it 100%. And a kid is a kid. And we all were there at one point in life where we thought we knew everything and all that good stuff there. And then the older you get, you realize you you don't know anything. You don't know what you don't know is one of my favorite phrases that when I'm training folks, I'm always reminding them of that. It's like, you as a worker, if you're not a manager, if you're not responsible for running the operation, you may think you have all the answers. You may think you know what's best for business. But until you get into the big seat And then you find out what's really going on and what the real obligations are and what the real stakes are. You don't know what you don't know. So we could trickle that down to even a situation like this with Jackie Jr., where it's like, kid, you don't have it. You're not a tough guy. You're not some mastermind. You don't have it. You didn't serve in the military, which they could have turned you into a stone cold killer or something like that. Like there's literally nothing you can offer to the life other than being a square. Where again, if you're a lawyer or a doctor, then at least you can offer services that way. But in terms of being a criminal, you don't know what you don't know, and you're never going to be this thing. You're never going to be good at it. And it got him killed because he tried to be something that he never was ever destined to be in life. It's unfortunate, but it's a story that plays out in real life every single day, unfortunately.
No, it is, and you know what, Duke? I'd say I got to add this. When you look at the character and what it was, right? He was an arrogant little brat. He had zero qualities about him. I'm talking zero. When you look at him, but they gave him a chance anyway. And when he did get shot, you didn't feel bad that he got shot because he deserved it, because he was a dumbass playing with a whole big, box of dynamite. So, I mean, in the end, he was, god awful stupid. He was a liar, untrustworthy, a manipulator of people, who was given the world by Tony Soprano and could have had anything he wanted if he just would have stayed on the straight and narrow.
Hindsight is 2020, but we don't need hindsight when it comes to speaking to the young folks in life. Listen, all of you adults, I know the age group that listens to this show, all of you adults, please do everything that you can to steer kids away from doing things they have no business doing. It's so important. Continue to guide them to doing the right thing. Unfortunately, you can't save everybody, but you can at least try. And that's an interesting concept that I don't think enough people talk about. Vito, when I was younger, growing up in the 80s in the Boston area, our city's a lot safer now than it ever was. Uh, in memory, like literally, we have one of the lowest murder rates and crime rates in general for any major city in the nation. I think we were actually number one in 2024 for being so low. But when I was growing up, 300 murders was a normal thing in the city, and crack was happening, and the gangs were doing their thing. And I'm a son of two cops, so I hear things about what's really going on out there. And then as I get older, and you start being old enough to be out on your own and stuff like that, of course the gangs want you to join them and do things like that. So you got to make a choice. Are you going to go that way or not? But I'll tell you something. The little punks would be like, "Hey, be with us." And then you meet somebody who's really in charge, and they will look at you and they would say, "No, you don't. You shouldn't be. You're smart. Like, what are you doing over here? Get the hell out of here. You're not one of us." Thank God for people like that. You go down the street and you play basketball with everybody, and then they would say, "Okay, you got to go now." And it's like, "Okay, I got to go now." Meaning you don't need to be around for whatever's about to happen next. You're smart. You got a head on your shoulders. You got a future. You got a family. Get away from us. We don't want you around this thing. Thank God for people like that. And it's interesting that Tony Soprano, who's supposed to be this violent maniac, in a lot of ways we saw it play out in that show, he at least had enough of a heart to try to save somebody. You know what I mean? At least try. That matters, man. So if you're an adult who, you have kids who are looking up to you and things like that, just make sure that you're steering them in the right direction, folks. Please. It matters.
Everybody knows about my wrestling career. We do not talk about wrestling on this, but on this show. But in this scenario, this wrestling knowledge I'm going to share with you is to be considered Don Vito LoGrasso, the Don of Wrestling, sharing with all these prospective guys who want to be up and coming wrestlers. And the first thing they do with their mothers and fathers who come to me, yeah, I'm going to wrestling school, I'm going to train to be a pro wrestler. Here's what I tell them. You guys will listen and you will like this, and they don't like the truth because they don't like it. The mother and fathers are standing there and they're looking at me. They're wondering what I'm going to say. I am a realist and I do not bullshit and I tell the truth. First thing I say is, what about going to the gym and getting in shape before you go in the wrestling business? So the kid looks at me, all kids look at me. What do you mean get in shape? Don't you get in shape? No, you have to be in shape because obviously you're not, a gym person. I said, what do they look for in the prospective developmental territories, especially NXT? They say, they say, I don't know. They said bodies. People want athletes. Okay. Before you venture into this and waste your mother and father's money, do you have a college education to fall back on? They say no. I said, not everybody makes it in wrestling. So right there, I just beat them down, and their mothers and fathers are like looking at me like you just said the best things ever, and the things I've been telling this kid for months. Guys, not everybody makes it. Do you have a plan B? Do you have a college education? Are you special enough to go through the grind? Because I could tell you one thing, and this goes for everybody out there. If you had to go through it when I came through it, more than three-quarters of the wrestlers today would be in the stands watching the show. And that is the God's honest truth. And that's from Vito LoGrasso, being a mafia boss in the wrestling business, straightening out all the young guys who think, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. Kid, you got a long way to go.
Long way to go indeed. Let's move on to the next one here, Vito, because we got an interesting one here. Meadow. I'm gonna go with her before I get to AJ. Meadow Soprano. Now, this is the daughter of Tony, highly intelligent, highly emotionally in tune with her surroundings. In the beginning, she would just look at her father. She wouldn't even say anything. She would just look at him. And he would look at her, and it would be that look like, I know you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. I know you're into something and it's bad. And he could barely look her in the eye because he knows that like she's looking at him like, whoa, this is like really bad what you're into. Very interesting character. Um she had to go through an evolution of hating the fact that her father was mobbed up and doing all of these things. But then eventually she comes to like an enlightenment where she realizes, you know what? If it wasn't for this guy and the things that he does, I wouldn't have the life that I have. So I got a choice to make. I can either hate my family and try to excommunicate myself from them and what have you, or I can do my best to be as positive as I can be and try to contribute to the family in a positive manner and make the best out of the situation. And when we get to the end of the series, that's exactly what happens. She becomes a lawyer. And again, she becomes somebody who's useful, who actually can be helpful. And she's a square, no question about it. But really interesting, just her connection, especially with her father, and knowing that he's in the life. And eventually she asks him, but she already knew the answer. And he knew that she knew. And it just seeing that transition through the years and what have you. I'm curious, Vito, when you look at Meadow, and I understand that it's coming from a female perspective, but still, this is a kid who was born into this life. It was normal to have all these uncles and people and these tough guys and whatever. Then, as she gets older and she's watching the news, and it's like, oh, so and so is dead, or so and so is in jail, or didn't I just see that guy the other day? How is he not here anymore? And she starts putting the pieces together and what have you. For you personally, Vito, I'm curious about this. How much of a connection did you feel with the Meadow character as a person who was a young person who was born into the life?
I looked at Meadow as a kid growing up and had all the toys. She was spoiled. She didn't get away. She stamped her feet and gave her problems. Very emotional, very loving kid. Loved her family. Very family oriented. Okay. But as she got older, she got smarter, rebellious, wanted to do her own thing, and Tony would put his foot down. The mother and father went through a divorce, which people forget, and now is hard on the children at the time because you see it all happening. And when you get to be a teenager, you know your father's out there running around on your mom. It doesn't sit good. So that's another thing that was going on. But the one thing, you know, that Tony did, he always protected his kids and he protected them against the riffraff. Just like when that gentleman came up in the coffee shop and he put his hands on Tony's on Meadow, wiped the whipped cream off her mouth. Uh, you just don't do that. And I'll be honest with you, Tony let him off easy because I would have gave that guy a beat and then shot him and then killed him again. You know what I mean? But he only did it once. You know what I mean? I can tell you all somebody messed with my family. I went to the guy's store. Guy was about six. You'd be 300 pounds sitting, in the back. I didn't give a shit. I lifted him up off his feet and I banged him against the wall a few times and I almost choked him to death. I was so mad that he did it. I went back in the store 2 minutes later. I got to my car, went back in. I ripped his cross off his chain off his neck, and I grabbed him again. I told him, "You ever do this again, I'll fucking kill you." So I think I made my point, and then he spoke to me afterwards. You know, I know we had differences, but I could put you in jail. I got it on tape. I said, "Yeah." But then when I come out of jail, I'm going to come to your fucking store again. Swear to God, this is what I told him. He says, "Well, we're just gonna forget about this, and I hope we could." I said, "We're gonna fucking forget about it. You goddamn right we are." But the point is, Tony always looked out for Meadow. Tony looked out for AJ. Meadow had no interest at all at being involved. She wanted to travel the world and try different things. She wanted to use her education. That's why at the end she wound up getting married, and we didn't get that far, but she wound up. The story was supposed to be getting married and having kids and having a happy life and becoming a lawyer, becoming someone successful. Something that Tony Soprano wanted for his child, to be out of the business, be successful, and have a better life than what he had.
Damn right. Damn right. Well said, and great insight as somebody who can relate on many different fronts. Um, really, really interesting character, Meadow. Meadow is the type of character that you wouldn't expect in most mob TV shows or movies or stories or what have you. She she kind of reminds me of Michael Corleone's sister. Not as much of a mess, but who she ends up being in the end, where she turns into like a consigliere, so to speak. Right? She really gets her stuff together in the end. Um, because she comes to that enlightenment. She comes to that realization that instead of pushing against this thing and trying to act like, acting out and thinking that you're better and what have you, how can you be useful? And that doesn't mean you got to be a criminal to be useful, but how can you be useful? So again, it's an interesting arc there. The Meadow Soprano character definitely is underrated in that regard, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Duke, I don't see Meadow. How could you say Meadow and um the sister of Vito Corleone,
Oh, Michael, Vito's daughter.
of Vito's daughter? Oh, okay, okay, yeah. I guess I could see that. Where it's the same thing. I could definitely
Yeah.
see that. Yes.
Connie, because remember, she was acting out at first. She was acting
Yeah.
well. Actually, she wasn't even acting out. She was a sweet girl. She was with Carlo. Carlo was abusing her. They had to take Carlo out eventually, but Sonny gets killed. So that happens. They try to kill her father. Eventually, he passes away in natural causes, and she completely flips. and she turns into this jerk who's a handful. You know what I mean? She's a liability at that point. She's messing around with people she has no business messing around with, the whole 9 yards. And then eventually she comes to Michael and she lets him know that she realizes, yeah, you know what? I need to get myself together here. And it's an interesting turn because she remains that person to the end. And I
Right.
feel like Meadow, in her own way, was exactly like that. In the end, she transitioned into this adult who understands things better, and she stays that way. You know, similar. I think similar, different, but definitely similar in some
Different but
ways. There.
similar, but it goes without saying, you got to grow up. And
Yeah, you got to
sometimes
grow up.
growing up in your family is definitely difficult. And that goes for everybody. I'm sure everybody has a family situation where you act a certain way, and then a couple years down the road, you get to rethink things because you're more mature. You look at things differently and not looking as a child, but like as an adult, and it may be an experienced adult. And then you accept things and handle things in a different persona. So I definitely get it.
Indeed. Now for the main event here, AJ Soprano. Very, very interesting because we get him when he's a very young kid. What was he like, middle school age when the
Yeah.
series started? Perfect. So we got to see him from middle school going all the way up to when he becomes an adult. He doesn't go to college. He ends up becoming like a stunt coordinator or something like that. He's in the movie business, all that good stuff there. But we got to see that kid grow up during the most important years of a young man's life. And it's interesting. My perspective, and definitely want to hear yours after you hear this, Vito. Tony felt a lot of guilt with AJ because on the surface, the kid's not listening. He's moping around all the time. What the hell is wrong with him? I'm going to put a boot up his ass, whatever. He couldn't quite figure AJ out. But the more things kept going, you realized AJ wasn't much different from Tony in a lot of ways, which means AJ also wasn't much different from Tony's father in a lot of ways. AJ suffered from depression
Right.
and he suffered from anxiety. And he was a young kid, so this is the early stages of that stuff. Now you got a Tony Soprano who, what, he's in his 40s during the series?
Right.
So he's a grown man and he's passing out because, the anxiety attacks and things like that, the panic attacks, he's passing out and he's got to go see the shrink and he's got to, there's a lot going on in terms of how he's coping with all the pressure that he has to deal with and all the decisions he has to make and living with the guilt of the decisions he had to make. He had to kill his best friend. There's a lot of things that he had to go through. So when he looks at AJ, it's almost like he's looking in a mirror. In my opinion, that's the way I interpret it. And you can't smack that out of a kid. It ain't that simple. You know what I mean? And if you don't get the kid help, then he's going to grow up to be like Tony, where
Well,
it, he was what he was. Yeah, please go ahead.
now I think that what people miss out of the whole thing is AJ and his father were very close and he believed in everything Tony said. I think that's what led into his depression and his anxiety and his unsure status as being who he's supposed to be. If you guys understand what I'm saying here, and I think nobody's ever put that analysis into this, but being someone who's close to their father and believing you do this, you do this, you do this, and then when you comes to you expect your father to do everything he says and then does something different and calls bullshit on his life because I believed in you, just like when Uncle June was gonna kill Tony, and then he goes up to the hospital and he's gonna kill Uncle June. He says, "What are you doing?" And he breaks down outside. You said anybody hurt your family, and you're supposed to go kill them. And what did Tony say? He says, "You're a nice kid." He said, "This is not you. This is not how it's supposed to be." He's so confused because he believed in his father and everything he preached to him, but it was something different. Remember, do as I say, not as I do. You know what I mean? And in this scenario, you're talking about, okay, don't do as I say, but do as I do. It's definitely a different, um, it's definitely different. And you feel for AJ. He tries to commit suicide. They do everything to help him. But then once he gets his life together, you could see the change, especially in the last episode where he's stable, he has a life, he's grown up, he's a cool kid. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you,
Well said. Well, what do you think about the notion though that Tony is looking into a mirror when he looks at AJ? Once he starts realizing that the kid has the same symptoms that he has.
it's like any other parent. You feel bad and you don't wish it upon your child, but what are you going to do? I mean, it's life. That goes for everybody who has kids. You see your son or daughter having the same issues as you did. I mean, what could you possibly say?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough because again, when you're trying to keep your kid away from being you always want your kids to be better than you. That's the whole point. If I'm the foundation, then I don't even want you to be the house. I want you to be the roof. I want you to be way above that. You know what I mean? And so it's like you're supposed to crawl on my shoulders and achieve more. You're supposed to be better. And seeing that AJ wasn't necessarily motivated and all he wanted to do was sit around and mope and play video games. He didn't even want to get out of the house. Like this is who the kid was. It was tough. It was tough. Tough for Tony to face. Tough for him to try to figure out because he knew. And then when Uncle Junior is telling Tony, your father used to pass out the same way you did. He'd get all anxious and then he would just fall out. Same way. He had that thing. Whatever that thing is, he had that same thing you got. So, like you said, when AJ's having these same problems, it's like, oh my God, the family curse. The family curse. I passed it down. Really, really deep stuff, man, that unfortunately plays out in all families to some degree. And, in the end, though, AJ turned out all right. He figured it out. He got some help. And because of that, he was able to become a productive member of society. And again, he wasn't doing anything illegal. So that dream was realized to a certain degree. That's how the series ended. We got to see Meadow and AJ. They seemed like they were all right. Um,
Right.
Unlike Jackie Aprile Jr., who unfortunately, because he didn't have his father continuing to guide him anymore, you saw the way he turned out. And that's the other part of that thing. That one moment in life changed his entire trajectory, and he couldn't recover from it. How many people
No,
do we know that happens to?
probably more than we like to admit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's deep, man. It's very deep. Listen, we can watch these things and we can get caught up in the sensationalism, the violence, the language, and all that other stuff there. It's easy to focus on that stuff. But when you dig below the surface and you really start dissecting from a psychological standpoint what's really going on here, it's very hard to not see this in your own life to a certain degree. You know these folks. There are people in your family like that. It doesn't mean they necessarily have to be gangsters, but you know people like this. Which is why The Sopranos, in my opinion, I think it resonates even to this day. We know that for a fact because, the way that people have been listening and sharing this show, certainly they've been enjoying us talking about this stuff. But it's like there's a lot of life, and I'm not even going to call it necessarily life lessons. I'm going to take it a step further than that. there's a lot of reflection on life that series was able to project. And unlike most things I've ever seen before, I mean, honestly, Vito, can you think of a TV show that captured real life on so many different levels and was so layered like The Sopranos?
Let's see. Hmm. I don't know. I mean, you talk about stuff like that. You want to know what was a good show to watch parents correcting their kids? You want to know what show there was which was good?
What's that?
Good Times,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
right? Then you have Happy Days,
A little different.
which a little different, but you saw the upbringing, and then Richie had to get tough, and when he had to do these things,
Mm.
you know what I mean? He was brought back to earth. You know, another show that maybe was rough around the edges and trying to teach somebody something, and in the end, the guy got it and thanked the gentleman, was Archie Bunker.
Yeah, All in the Family. Good call.
All in the Family,
Good call.
right? Um, when now you remember when Archie first took in Mike Stivic, called him a meathead. They had their different views. They fought. They did everything. Mike was relentless, but he's living in the man's house, eating the guy's food, living in, banging his daughter. You know what I mean? Finally, they get married. And then in the end, he says, "Thank you. You were like a father to me, and you taught me, and you helped me." Same thing in Good Times. JJ might have got mixed up, or Michael needed to be corrected. I think when Michael, educated the father, because the father wasn't school savvy, right? And he had to give him a spanking, and Daddy, I know I got to get this. He said, "Wait a minute," and then he told him about Black history that intrigued the father. That my son is smart, and maybe I could learn a few things. So that was another good TV show. The Brady Bunch was too goody goody, so you can't really put it there. The Partridge Family was like, but when you talk about mafia, variety show or kids shows, you can only reference movies and segments of movies to compare to The Sopranos, and I think that's what we lack is a everyday mafia growing up movie sitcom. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just it doesn't exist in modern times, and who knows? Maybe because it's already been done so well that no one wants to tackle it again. But there's no shortage of mafia movies, like you said. They're not all good, but there's no shortage. There's always mafia movies coming out every year. I like the notion of showing the people, not just the violence. Show me who the person really is. Show me the conflict that person is going through in life. Because you can't, in my opinion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe any one person is all bad, and I don't think any one person is all good. Being a human being is all about this give and take, this yin and yang, these moments where you got to make decisions and you got to think about not only survival but also what's best for everybody that I'm responsible for. And those decisions, they're not always the easiest decisions to make, and you don't always feel good about it. And sometimes you carry a lot of regret as a result of making these decisions. But you had to do it in the moment. I like that because that's the real human experience. And when we don't get enough of that, it's just, it is what it is, right?
Yep, that is 100% the truth.
Wow, we really went down a road this episode here, folks. I'll tell you, this is, listen, you keep responding so well to it that we have no choice. We got to knock it out of the park for you. And certainly our next episode, when we start really digging into uh, the real heel from The Sopranos, Ralph. A lot of you corrected me and said, no, Phil was terrible, but Ralph was absolutely the heel of heels in that series. Yeah, we're gonna get into him. We're gonna get into Ralph, and that's gonna be something because that guy was a piece of work. On another one, he was a great earner, made a whole lot of money for the family, but he was a terrible person, just a terrible person. So that'll be interesting to dissect there. Any thoughts on next week's episode there before we close out, Vito?
Now I'm looking to tear apart that guy because he's another guy who was a prick, and I didn't like him, and he should have got slapped up a long time ago.
Yeah. That was one thing that people loved when you started talking about not only how you felt about the Turk, as they called him there, but when you talked about the difference between Medicans and folks who are coming off the boat, and sometimes the clashes in the different cultures and what have you, that was a big hit. So certainly I can't wait to hear what you have to say about Ralph. But, till then, Duke Loves Wrestling on Facebook, on Twitter, DukeLovesWrestling@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the shows. Send in your questions, your suggestions. We love it. Vito, once again, plug away, brother.
Hey, we have the Big Vito brand on Facebook, the Big Vito brand on Twitter, Big Vito brand on Instagram and TikTok. And guys, also, if you need anything, go to my website, bigvito.com. You can contact me for personal appearance. If you want to buy merchandise, come to me. I will sell you what I have. Guys, don't be ashamed. If you got to go to Duke, you got to go to Noel, come to myself. Just, get with us and we'll see what we could do to make your dreams come true.
Until then, Vito, take us out with our word of the week.
You really want this one, guys?
Here we go.
I got it. Boltana.
Should I even ask?
That means whore.
Unbelievable.
A friend of ours, he'll stand up tall. Through gunfire smoke, he'll never fall. With heart of gold and steel resolve, a mystery we'll never solve.